We are looking at 14 now. So we finished up Unit 6. We've gone through list loops, traversals. At this point, you're like really close to being ready to write code for the AP performance test. There's just really one, kind of two things that we need to show you. And that's what we're going to do in Unit 7. So Unit 7, we're going to take 2 weeks on this because I want to make sure that you guys understand it. So it's going to slow down a little bit as far as how much work that you have to do. But we're going to use this video to kind of talk to this idea of parameters and returns. All right, so again, if you're in class with me, we kind of walk through this in person. When we were dealing with variables, we had this idea that we had a Ziploc baggie, and then we put a post-it note in the baggie. So when we start talking about parameters and arguments and returns, they introduce this idea of an envelope. So I'm going to use this as I go through it. Hopefully it helps you. If not, just try to get the concept. I know for some people these visuals help. For others, it's more about just looking at the code. So we're going to try to do this both ways here. So what I have here is, this is a function, right? It's called make cake, and they've essentially written this function name on the back of an envelope. And then I have these two, we're going to call these placeholders for now. So one of them is called tiers, and one of them is called flavor. So if you remember, when you define a function or when you call a function, right? Like if I was going to call the update screen, I would say update screen, and then I'd have the open and close parentheses. The idea here is we're going to introduce this idea of parameters and arguments. So those parentheses, when you define your function and when you're calling your function, we're going to start putting values in there, right? In one situation, when we define the function, we are going to call the values that we put inside the parentheses a parameter. When you're calling the function, the values that you put inside your parentheses, we're going to call those arguments. And I'll show you that here in a minute. But the idea is, this is a variable, tiers, right? This is a variable, flavor, so I can assign values to tiers and flavors individually. So for this example, I'm going to say tiers, I'm going to assign it the value 3. And flavor, I'm going to give it the string lemon, right? So kind of what I'm saying here is I'm going to, use this function make cake. This function is going to have some instructions inside of it that tell me how to make a cake. And then I'm going to use these placeholders so that I can change the way my cake looks every single time, right? It's another form of abstraction. We call it procedural abstraction. But we're just trying to make these functions even more reusable than they already are. Right? I don't have to write a function that says make lemon cake with 3 tiers or make chocolate cake with 4 tiers. I can just say make cake and then use these placeholders for how many tiers I want and how many flavors. Or sorry, for the flavor that I want. Right? So this is kind of what this means. Their idea with the envelope is like the envelope is your function. So on the envelope you would write the name of your function. You would then put the 2 boxes or 3 boxes for however many values or placeholders you wanted. And then inside the envelope, this is where the code goes for your function, right? Those are those instructions for how to make a cake. So we're going to pretend like these are our instructions, right? So I have this function make cake, and it's got a parameter tiers and another one called flavor. So I can use, these variables. We call them parameters. They're really just variables at the end of the day. But when I specifically say a parameter, that's like a key for you to know that I'm talking about a variable that's created for a specific function. So we don't want to use the word variable. We want to use the word parameter because that tells us exactly what it's doing. So in this case, make cake, I have tiers and flavor. And then here's my instruction. So I'm going to say, okay, repeat this 3 times, right? This is pseudocode. If you were writing this in JavaScript, this would be your for loop, right? For var I equals 0, I, less than tiers, I plus plus, right? So it's telling us to do this however many times tiers is. And then so each time it runs, it's going to make a cake again, with the appropriate flavor. In this case, I'm passing in lemon, so it's going to say make a lemon cake. right? Ice the cake. It's going to do that 3 times, so it's going to make all 3 cakes. All will be lemon. And then it says assemble tiers layers into a cake. So this would read as assemble 3 layers into 1 cake. So if we kind of walk through this, we know tiers is 3, flavor is lemon. So repeat 3 times, bake a lemon cake, right? And then when it's done, assemble 3 layers into 1 cake. So if we're kind of running through this visually, I've called the function. So it's going to repeat 3 times, and each time it's going to make a lemon cake. So I got my first layer, my second layer, my third layer, and then my loop is done, so it's going to assemble the 3 layers into 1 cake. Right, and then it says put in a box, so it's going to put that cake in a box for me. Right, so again, make cake, we have tiers and flavor, right? Kind of like what I was saying, these placeholders, right, a parameter, it's a variable in a function definition, right? So we don't want to use the word variable, we want to call it a parameter, but a parameter is just a variable in a function definition. And these are used as placeholders for values that will be passed through to the function. Right? These values that we assign in the function call, we call those arguments. Right? So the value passed to the parameter. So this 3 is going to go to tiers. So this argument 3 gets passed to the parameter tiers. So tiers has a value of 3. This argument, the string lemon, gets passed to this parameter flavor. So flavor now has a value of lemon. All right. So the nice thing about this, like I was saying earlier, I don't have to write separate functions to build different types of cakes anymore, right? If I wanted to build a 4-layer cake that was chocolate, I can just pass different arguments or different values to these parameters. So if I want 4 tiers, I can pass 4 to tiers, right? And if I want a flavor of chocolate, I can pass chocolate to flavor. Right, so that would build me a 4-tiered chocolate cake. So we're going to look at another function. This one is called a cost cake. So this one's going to calculate how much a cake costs. And the cost is going to be determined by how many tiers I have to build and what flavor it is. So we're going to go back to 3 for tiers and lemon for flavor. Again, those are the parameters. These are the arguments, or those values that will be assigned to the parameters. And here is our code, right? So this is my definition, cake cost, and I have 2 parameters, tiers and flavor. So these parameters, I have to use them in my code as placeholders. All right, so this idea, I'm going to create 2 variables. One is going to be my flavor cost, and one is going to be my total. This code in here will determine the value of flavor costs based on the argument passed to the flavor parameter. So if I pass in chocolate to flavor, when this runs, it will say if chocolate equals chocolate. If that's true, my cost is 5. If I pass lemon in, lemon equals chocolate is false, this one would say if lemon equals lemon, that's true, so my cost would get set to 4. And then, if I passed in vanilla, it gets set to 3. Then to determine the total, I can just multiply my flavor cost that was determined up here, by the number of tiers. Right? So in this case, we have this little return down here, right? And this is the second part of today's lesson, right? Beyond the parameters and arguments, we also need to talk about return. So what does return do? Right? So basically, after running this code, what does flavor cost equal and what does total equal? So I know my cost is going to be 4 because my value for flavor is lemon. So lemon equals chocolate is false. Lemon equals lemon is true, so flavor cost gets a value of 4. This will be false because it's not vanilla, it's lemon. So then I'm going to take my flavor cost 4 and multiply my tiers, which is 3. So 4 times 3 is going to give me 12. Right? And then I'm returning this total variable. right? So what does return do? It does two things. One, it stops the flow of the function. So once you run this line of code, return, it kills your function, right? If this return was up higher, like right here, once that return runs, it would not run any code after the return, right? It's like a way to break out of your function immediately. The other thing that it does is it returns the value of whatever variable that we're returning back to where the function was called, right? So in this case, I can essentially create a variable called cake calculator and set it equal to the call of a function, right? Which probably doesn't make sense yet, but hopefully this next slide helps you. All right, so I'm creating a variable called cake calculator. I'm going to set it equal to, and I'm going to call my cake cost function, right? These are my arguments. So, you know, prior to this lesson, you would say cake cost, open, close parentheses, right? We're not doing that anymore. We are filling in these parentheses. So when I call my function, that's where I give it my arguments. The arguments are the values that we want it to assign to our parameters, right? And it goes in order. So I say variable cake calculator equals, I call my function cake cost and I give it the two arguments that I want. So I'm going to say 3 comma lemon because I'm going to have two parameters in my cake cost definition. Right, so if I console log this out, right, console log cake cost plus, I'm going to concatenate, call this function, right, this function has that return. So when the function's done, total was 12, if you remember. So it returns 12 right here where this function was called, right? So this will then print out cake cost plus 12, right? So return is just a way for us to get that value that we created out of our function, right? Not going to go into too much more about this today because as we go through the code.org lessons, you're going to see the code and see how this works. And I think it'll make more sense then. But there are some takeaways, right? This idea of functions with parameters and return values, it just helps us simplify our code. Functions can only return one value at a time, so you can't return twice within a function, right? Because remember, once that return runs, it's done. So you can't return once and then try to return again. The second one will never run. All right. A function can have no parameters and no return values. That's fine. That's what you've been doing in this class all the way up to this point. So if you're writing a function and you don't need parameters and you don't need return values, that's fine. You can write a function with parameters but no return value, right? You'll see examples of that this week in your code. You can have return values but no parameters, or you can have parameters and return values, right? You are free to configure this however you want. So kind of some takeaways. Again, this idea of procedural abstraction, what I really want you to know is this is abstraction. We're making things simpler for ourselves. But do know this term, you know, procedural abstraction. That is what we refer to this as. Using parameters allows the function, also called procedures, to be generalized. So like we can have make cake, I don't need make lemon cake, or make chocolate cake, or make lemon cake with 3 tiers, or make chocolate cake with 4 tiers. I can just have make cake, and then using these parameters and arguments, I can have it do whatever type of cake I want based on my instructions. This helps us improve code readability. Procedural abstraction manages complexity, so our code becomes even more reusable. These kind of takeaways are questions that you might see on the MCQ, right? So don't gloss over this, kind of understand these points that we're making. And then again, here's some of your vocab. Parameter, a variable in a function definition. It's used as a placeholder for values that will be passed through to a function. Argument, that is the value passed to the parameter. And then return, used to return the flow of control to the point where the procedure, also known as the function, was called. All right. So that is the lecture for parameters and returns. So if you need to watch this again, you know, you're free to do that. If this isn't making sense, you know, come by my room, ask for help, and I will see you in the next video.